Just got it.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to, hopefully the weather will hold up enough in Chicago so that we'll be able to get through the year. But if anyone wants to get off for safety reasons, etc., you'll do that. And that's the end. And you'll, God willing, everything will be okay. And then later on, you'll get back to the shear. No hard feelings on my part. We're starting a new Perek tonight. I'm, as you can see, actually connecting with you thanks to the marvels of technology from our nation's capital. So I'll try to stay bipartisan and we'll get underway with the Gemara for the new Perek. Yeah. If you missed the last year, I'm sorry. We were Messiah Perek Gimel, Mem Bet Amud Bet. It was on Shavuot. Now we gather tonight to open up the new Perek Daled Lulav Va'arava. Little introduction to Lulav Va'arava. Very short, in fact. Number one, it's the beginning of new sugyas, by which I mean, that's fairly obvious, but whereas chapter 1 and chapter 2 were about the halachot of building a sukkah, chapter 3 was about the Daled Minim. Chapter 4 is now going to be much more about the mitzvot 4 and really to the end of the Masachet, mitzvot related to the Yom Tov of Sukkot that are obviously related to the Daled Minim, but are also going to segue into other conversations about whether it's the treatment of the Daled Minim. We'll get back now. This is going to be the first sugya in the Mishna and the Gemara about how Shabbos impacts the observance of Sukkot and its various mitzvah, particularly the Daled Minim. From there, we'll segue into conversations about everything related to the mitzvah of Arava. From there into issues related, I'm skipping, but the Simcha Beit Shoeva, everything connected to that. We're on Membet Amud Bet, and when we open this Perek, I warn you in advance, it will seem somewhat disjointed. Well, the Mishnah not so much, but the Gemara especially, and some questions that will arise, which I'll leave you to ask, no problem. You'll see soon, if you just hold your peace a couple more minutes, the Gemara itself is going to try to address those questions and anticipate some of the questions that we'll have when we're opening it up. So we begin Perek Dal again, Mem Bet Amud Bet, Lulav Va'arava, Shisha V'Shiva. It's giving you the number of days of Yom Tov when we observe these mitzvot. Lulav Va'arava, Shisha V'Shiva, Hahalo V'Hasimcha Shmona. So we know that, of course, Sukkot is a 7-day festival, and yet in certain ways it is an 8-day festival, right? Yom Hashmini, the 8th day, Chag HaAtzeret Hazeh. It's a separate Yom Tov in 6 ways. We'll see that later on in this Masachet. And it is also a continuation of Sukkot in other ways. Therefore, you have the number 8 coming up. So Lulav and Arava, 6 or 7, depending when Shabbat falls out. Hallel and Simcha is all 8 days. I'm just going through the numbers. Then we're going to go back to through the Mishna a second time. I just want to get a skira of what's going on. Yeah, I didn't define any of these terms necessarily. We'll come back to them. But we'll use Rashi for that. Right? Sukka v'Nisach Hamayim Shiv'ah Hechalil Chamisha v'Shisha. So when it comes to Nisach Hamayim, that's the water libations. That's going to be 7 days. The Chalil is the playing of the instruments. That's the wind instrument associated with Simcha Beit Shoeva. Will be 5 or 6. Then Lulav Shiva Ketzad. The Mishnah starts to analyze itself. When and how could Lulav be for 7 days? Right? We have the beginning of the Gemara, is the Mishnah rather, Lulav Va'arava. So then the Mishnah dials back and says, well, when would be the circumstance of 7 full days of Lulav? So right there in the Mishnah, which you don't always find in Mishnayot, but you do find sometimes, the Mishnah is explaining itself, which is one of the reasons I glossed through it. Okay, so Lulav Shiva Ketzad. Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag Shechal Yot B'Shabbat, Lulav Shiva. If the first day of Sukkot falls on a Shabbat, so Friday night is the first night of Sukkot, the Lulav will be a 7-day mitzvah, meaning you'll take it the first day. Everyone will take it the first day. Only some people will take it the first day. Not defined in the Mishnah. We'll see shortly that it's going to be limited to the Mikdash, at least for part of Jewish history. And maybe for part of Jewish history, maybe it was also permitted to be brought into the Bate Knesiot. We sort of saw this earlier. Mem Aleph Amud Bet to Mem Bet Amud Aleph. The Gemara, the Mishnah here continues. Then it would be Shiva Ushar Kol Hayamim Shisha. If it started on any other day of the week, then it will only be a 6-day mitzvah, right? Because then it falls out on one of the other days of the week, which means that Shabbat will be an intervening Shabbat Chol HaMoed, and that means that we have the same level of mitzvah outside of the mikdash, and we will not observe the mitzvah of Lulav on that day. So that's already from the Mishnah. Arava Shiva Ketzad. How could an Arava be a 7-day mitzvah? Yom Hashvi Shel Arava Shechal Liot B'Shabbat. If the 7th day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbat, then the mitzvah of Arava, we don't know what Arava is based on just looking in the Mishnah, unless you remember because you learned through on Daf Yomi or something. It doesn't tell us. This is the mitzvah of Arava, right? If it falls out on a Shabbat, somehow the Arava is going to be a 7-day mitzvah, i.e. inclusive of what we call Hoshana Rabbah. Yeah. So how could that be if we're not aware? Are we aware of a pasuk that tells us about the mitzvah of Arava? Lulav, we certainly are. But where's the mitzvah of Arava, the separate mitzvah? It's somehow going to be Docha Shabbat. That can only be true if the mitzvah of Arava is somehow deoraita. But we're not clear on what its source is. We'll look in Rashi in a few minutes. Yeah, just to sort of process some of the questions.
Yeah. Now, this was from before. This was, I assume, from before the day of a fixed calendar, so that the 7th day could come on Shabbat.
Exactly. Right. So there's the next thing I was going to get to, without dipping a toe into the world of academic Talmud, but even a person learns in Beis Medrash realizes, wait a second, this Mishnah was written at a particular moment in Jewish history, right? Because after a certain point, as Art is pointing out, once the calendar was fixed, Hoshana Rabbah could not be on Shabbat. It was not possible. It's not possible to fall out now that way, right? That would be very problematic for us because we have a conflict with the mitzvah of Arav and the mitzvah of Shabbat for various reasons. Again, we'll see it shortly in Rashi. But this Mishnah presupposes that it is possible. Yeah. Also, this Mishnah presupposes that if the first day of Sukkot is Shabbat, that actually we would take the Lulav. We know we don't. Everybody agrees the first day is biblical all over the world. We've learned this many, many times. Right? Perek Chav Gimel. So it says, take for yourself the first day. Everybody agrees to that. Now, what about the rest of the days that we saw? Gvulin, Mikdash, depends where you are geographically. Then how do you define Mikdash? We'll come back to it. But all to say, when you look here in this Mishnah, possible could fall on Shabbat. The Rav will be 7 days. With Shar Kol Yom, it falls any other days, Shisha. Why? Because you're not going to take it on Shabbos. Yeah. Okay. So let me pause here, and I'll make one more statement about classification or sort of sequencing and ordering. We know already that the way that Shas is organized is loosely around topics, but it has a very associative component to it. You're familiar with this in any Masechta that you learn in Shas. Sukkah is no different. We saw already that at the end of the second Perek, after it talked about the how to build a sukkah, what it could be made of, how high it could be, how many walls it required, all different things about schach, and is it connected to the ground, is it not, right? Finally, at the end of the second Perek, it got to the observance of the mitzvah of sukkah itself. On Chaf Zayin, Chaf Chet, that's when it only starts talking about the observance itself, yeah? Then we got to page 29, and there we saw the mitzvah, the Perek began, Lulav HaGazol, where we focused on the Daled Minim. Now, at the end of this past Perek, which we just learned not so long ago, already back, if you turn back to page, whatever it was, Mem Aleph Amid Aleph, right, at the in the middle of the page, and 41a, the Mishnah rather was telling us already a story of chronology in the beginning, but the middle of the page, page 41a, again, Sukka, Mem, Aleph, Nalf, the Mishnah had said, we're just reviewing, so you get a sense of why is this Mishnah here? What is it doing? Barishon haya lulav nita b'mikdash shiva, u'v'medina yom echad. Right, at the beginning, lulav 7 days in the mikdash, and only the first day in the Medina means outside of the mikdash, right? Because of the way the Torah says it, because it was smachtem lifnei Hashem, lifnei Hashem Elokeichem shivat yamim. I think Elokeichem is in there. Art, correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So once in a blue moon, I get the pasuk right. I'm not reading it. Yeah. But what does it say? Once the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, we had Hitkin, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Shiluv Nitel b'Medina, Shiva Zeichel HaMikdash. We then had the shift where you're allowed to take the lulav now for all 7, or you're supposed to take the lulav, I should say, for all 7 days. Then the Mishnah itself, which is also subject to this general associative principle, throws in, and by the way, there's also another issue of a takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, but the Yom Hanaf, which we just had just now, was the right after at Pesach time, not just, but a few weeks ago. Yeah. Now, when you turn to 41b, what was the Mishnah there? Right. So we had also Yom Tov Harishon Shachag Chaliyot b'Shabbat Ha'amolichin Ulavein LeBeit HaKnesset. Actually says in the Mishnah Beit HaKnesset. Right. Later on, we'll see there's going to be a little bit of a different girsa, but at least what we have in our Gemaras, the Vilna Shas, is printed 41b. At the beginning, when they had the first day of Yom Tov was Shabbat, meaning Friday night was the beginning of Yom Tov, everyone would bring their lulav to the Beit Knesset. Wherever you lived, you brought it to shul. You can carry it and all to carry in a public domain on Shabbos, even if it's for a Dvar Mitzvah. Yeah. L'macharat, mashkinu bain kol echad ve'echad, makir et shelo v'notlo. The next day, they would wake up, they would arrive, and everybody would recognize their own lulav. They put it in their stender. They knew where it was, and they would take it. Why? Right? You can't be yotz with someone else's, as we learned. Right? Then we have Rabbi Yossi chimed in, which is a big no-no, but you did it while you were tarib b'mitzvah to fulfill the mitzvah. You weren't fulfilling it at that moment, because then you fulfilled it and then you're not allowed to carry it. That's for sure carrying, but you hadn't fulfilled it yet, but you're going to figure out how to do it, and you're not allowed to do that. But if you did, you're getting a pass. Pater, it's usher, but you're pater. You don't have to bring a korban. Yeah. Why? Because the person took it out of the house with the license of a mitzvah. A license of a mitzvah. We talked about that a little bit. Just to remind you what Rashi said on 41b was birshut mitzvah shaya tarad b'mitzvah. You're busy. You're calculating. You're thinking. I got to do it. Right. And we talk kach ta'ah. You made a mistake because of that. What happened? What's the mistake? You forgot it's Shabbos. You know you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. You know that there is a Shabbos. You just didn't remember that today is Shabbos. Shabbat. And Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion, you don't have to bring a korban, right? So that's what we had seen. Those were the Mishnayot. And on Membet Amud Aleph, we saw the Mishnah at the end of the Perek, right, which is a bit curious, but it was discussing the idea of taking the daled minim and putting them back into water on Shabbat, and that was the connection, because we're talking about Shabbos. So here we came again to Shabbos, right? Another aspect of it. That's why it was there. I'm trying to show you that there's a progression here. It's not, so I'll pick a topic, we'll talk about this, that, little smatterings. There's a flow. Now, why did the Perek break where it broke? So it's also a shiloh. I think it's because the camera zoomed out, and now it's showing you all different aspects of the Yom Tov. It's not just about the Lulav. It's going to talk in the first sugis about Lulav, but it's going to soon segue into a Rava, and from there we'll be off to the to the discussion of the other mitzvahs, and it'll go in almost in order, pretty much, and culminating all the discussions about Simcha Beit Shoev, etc. And that's why the last Mishnah on 42a is a Kabbalah Isham Yad Benam Yad Baila Umachzirato Lamayim B'Shabbat. Right? Rabbi Yehuda then says no. On Shabbat you can give it back, but on Yom Tov you can add water, and Chol Hamoed you could change the water. Right, and then it was almost like a little extra line. Now that we mentioned that the wife can take from her son and from her husband and put it back in the water, what do you mean her son? Why can't he do it himself? So that's where you got to. Oh, by the way, he's chayav in the, it's a chayav belulav. It's got to do it. Is everyone following what's going on with the flow over here? It's moving from one thing to another. Then when we come into our Perek, now I'm going back to the Mishnah. There was a method to my madness, not just for the sake of review. The Mishnah now. Go back to the Mishnah. I'm right where in my Gemara, at least, I have a parentheses with a little superscript Dalid to say that the Maharshal. I quoted him on. We just talked about him. Yam Shel Shlomo, the Maharshal of Shlomo Luria, one of the great Chachmei Lublin, for whom Yeshivat Chachmei Lublin was named. I quoted him on Shavuot and the Shir about what was given Har Sinai, what was not, and he had particular ideas about the power of Chachamim. He says you have to erase that word Shabbat. Okay. He said you have to erase that word, b'Shabbat. But just so we'll erase it. Doesn't matter. But Lulav, Ketzad, what is the circumstance for Lulav? When could it be 7 days long? Yom Tov Harishon, we'll skip the brackets. Yom Tov Harishon Shachag, Shechal Yot b'Shabbat. If Yom Tov Harishon fell out on Shabbat, Friday night, the first night of Sukkot, Molichin et Lulavehen lehar habayit. Not that we take the lulav to the shul, but we take the lulav to the har habayit. Why would you take it to shul and not to the har habayit? One of two reasons. Either you live too far away and you have a shul where you live. It's possible. Or it's after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Okay? So now, but the Mishnah here is more globally about all these numbers. 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, 7 days, 5, 6. So, okay, when and how could it be of 7 days? You're taking the lulav. Yom Tov Shachar Shechal Yot b'Shabbat. Molich Lulavein lahar habayit. Chazanin. The chazanin means the people who worked in the shul, the shamashim. We call them the chazanim. Not like a chazan, a cantor, but the chazan is really a person who is serving the community to make technical things happen. Right? So the chazanin mekabel mehen, it would receive it. V'sojin oton agabe itztaba. They would arrange it upon a platform. Doesn't say what the platform is. Rashi will tell us in a few minutes. The older people in age or in levels of wisdom, not clear, but the zikanim, whoever they are, they would put in a particular chamber. Why? Why didn't they leave it with everybody else? We'll soon find out. Umalamdin otam lomar, and they would teach all the people as they were putting down the lulav to say, Kol mi shemagia lulavi liado. Whoever gets my lulav tomorrow, it's a matana, right? So it's not the shul where you have your own seat or the fewer people. It's the harabayit. It's a massive rush. So therefore, what happened? Lamachar maskini boin. They came to the harabayit again. They weren't allowed to carry, but they could carry on the harabayit. So they would come to the harabayit. What happened at that time? The chazanim would throw them in front of them. But what would end up happening is one guy would be smashing into the other, and sounds like they would either be hitting each other with the lulav or on purpose, they would get angry with each other, or just smashing into each other. Mechatfin means to grab something, so it's not the nicest lashon. They were mechatfin umakin. It sounds like they got into fights. That's my lulav. I remember I bought it. The other guy says, "Well, didn't you say yesterday if my lulav comes to someone else, my lulav should be a gift to somebody else? So now it's a gift to me. But I want it back. But I chose it. Took me an hour in the shuk. You play out how it goes. There were fights. And as a result of this, right, Uchsharo, Beitin, Shibali, they sakana, they thought it was dangerous. What did they do? They made a takana that everybody should take the lulav in their own home on Shabbat. That we do today. Clearly, we've marched on from there. But when you put these mishnayot, just line them up next to each other, you see, well, wait a second, there's strange things happening here in terms of chronology, right? On the Harabayit, at one point, everybody brought it before. They left it. You're still allowed to carry, even if you live in Yerushalayim. You could leave it in the Har Habayit, however. And then they were told, go home, do it in your house because it got too dangerous. Then at some point, same time outside, in the Gvulin, or not, or maybe it was after the Churban, but before the special Gzeira that we're going to learn in a few minutes in the Gemara. People were doing it in shul. They brought it before. I mean, look, it's going to be Tisha B'Av. Unfortunately, on the calendar it says Tisha B'Av. Either it'll be a Yantif or it won't be a Yantif. If it'll be a Yantif, so everything I'm saying now is Batul Levutel. But if it's not going to be a Yantif, but it's going to be the Moed that we remember from all the years past, what's going to happen? We're going to remind people 5 times over, don't bring your shoes on Shabbos. Remember? It's a hachana. Don't wear your shoes for Tisha B'Av on Shabbos. It's hachana, right? What are we going to tell everybody?
Right.
Before. Bring it before. Tisha B'Av is going to be it falls out on Shabbos. But tell them bring it before Shabbos. If not, you take off your shoes, right? Remember? So how and why did it happen? It sort of begs the question, why doesn't everyone just do it in their house? I don't know, there's a lot of things that have to do. You have to make Kiddush in your house. Am I worried that you're going to take your Kiddush out of the house on Shabbos, so therefore you shouldn't make Kiddush? But there's something clearly about the Lulav. Some of us know, we can anticipate because we already learned the Daf, right? So we learned the Sugyas before. We've heard of this thing called Gzera Derabba, but I'm trying to frame it. We have to understand, like, Takib, why is that necessary? Like, I could have done this mitzvah perfectly in my house, like many other things that I do. You have to do a brit milah on Shabbat if it falls out that way. Uvayom hashmini mo b'sar lato. So what happens if you have to do it on Shabbat? You can't bring the baby somewhere. The mole comes to the baby. Yeah, bring the things before Shabbat. Big machloket Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. What about the knife? Can you carry that? Right, etc. Machshirei mila. Anyway,
ask a quick question.
Yeah, please. I didn't see your hand before. Go ahead.
If in Yerushalayim during the time of the Beit HaMikdash, was there not a walled city then? It was open? Because you said they couldn't carry it even if they were in Yerushalayim, but was there not?
That's a good point. Apparently not everyone lived within the walls.
No.
And that's why I had to bring it up to the Har HaBayit. Apparently not everyone lived within the walls. There were already people apparently outside. Otherwise, you're right. It would be like in the walled city, the whole thing's enclosed, right? But that doesn't seem to have been an operative reality, even at the time when there was.
That's interesting. It's interesting what Eddie's mentioning, because I was thinking the same. If that's the case, then how would they do it then?
They had to bring it before Shabbos to Har HaBayit. That's described here. Now, what is not a likely scenario is that this story is happening with the Har HaBayit after the Churban. That's very unlikely. For all sorts of reasons. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it seems to me highly unlikely that they would be going up to the Har HaBayit after the Churban with a lulav and etrog. But not impossible. I suppose I think it's possible. It's just I'm not aware of a source for that sort of thing when it comes to the lulav. The reality of trying to unpack this involves an understanding of what's going on in the Mishnah itself, but also an understanding, I think, of I don't say global, but the regional Mishnayot that are related to this whole story, because they're all part of the mix. Let's learn Rashi through, and we'll start seeing more of a picture fill out. I want to get into the Gemara, obviously, but first we have to hammer out the Mishnah. So I'm in Rashi here. Lulav Arava, Rashi writes, Shehein Ba Mikdash, Kol Shiva, Lulav Linatila, Va'arava Lahakif Mizbeach, Kidal Akama Bepirkin, as we will learn later on Mem Hamid Aleph, when the attention of Chazal moves over to the Arava, right? So in the Mikdash, the Lulav and the Arava we're talking about in the Mikdash is Shisha V'Shiva, not so outside. This Mishnah is not from the time of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, but from before. Yeah. Why is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai listed earlier, by the way? So why is his Mishnah earlier? Put his Mishnah later. Go in chronological order, right? But a perfect example where chronology is not the only consideration. It's not. Therefore, when we got into it on what was on 41a, right? In the beginning, the lulav was taken in the Mikdash for 7 days. In the Medina, 1 day. Then things changed. So that's why I have to explain. But now in this Mishnah, which is a Mishnah about the numbers, about trying to figure out how many days this, how many days that, we're going to start reflecting on when was it actually possible that it could be 7 days, and how did things shift in terms of where the mitzvah was taking place while there was still a Beit HaMikdash, in fact. And what's interesting is, many things are interesting. There seems to be an advantage of doing the Na'anuim as part of a Hallel. We talked about this in Lamed Zayin and then Lamed Chet, together with the community, not the home game, but the community together in shul with the Na'anuim. Right? We talked about that, the Berov HaMahadrat Melech element practically. So Rashi here just says, Lulav Arava into the Mikdash, Kol Shiva, Lulav L'Natila, Arava L'Hakif Mizbeach. They would, according to what we're reading here, go around the Mizbeach with the Arava, and we'll come back to it. The forerunner, of course, of Hoshanot, yeah? Shisha v'Shiva. Pa'amim shedochin Shabbat, v'hen kol shiv'ah, u'pa'amim she'ein dochin, bavulu shisha yamim, u'lekamei mefarish v'azillah. So later on, we'll understand it more. But Rashi lets us know, sometimes it'll push Shabbos away, it'll be doches Shabbat, and then it'll be all 7 days. Sometimes it's not, and it'll only be 6. Hahalel refers to ligmor kol shmona, all 8 days of the holiday, including Shmini Atzeret. We say Hallel. Kain tiknu neviim rishonim. Right, that's what the Neviim rishonim were mitaken. Right, we saw this Gemara. It's Gemara in Sota. It's in a few places. You have it obviously in Psachim and in Erchin. So here, but Erchin mefarish Mishna mi Pesach, mipnei sheyemei chag chalukin b'korbanoteihen. Why does Rashi have to give you a little quote from Erchin? Why don't he give you a nice quote from Sota? I'll give you a nice quote from somewhere else. Why Dafka from Erchin? Right? I'm asking. Anybody want to venture a hazard a guess? So chronologically, it's Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. And Shavuot's not really in the running because it's one day. So yeah, you say Halal, it's Yantif. Why did the Mishnah have to go out of its way to tell us Hahalal v'Hasimcha Shmona? What was my Hava Amina about why I shouldn't say it all the days of Yantif as a full Halal? Can you make up a Hava Amina about Sukkot that differentiates the first day of Sukkot with the rest of the days of Sukkot?
Well, maybe Chol HaMoed is the same as Pesach.
Maybe the Chol HaMoed is the same as Pesach. Exactly. More than that, we're aware of a chiluk between in the Mikdash, out of the Mikdash when it comes to Sukkot, no? The Lulav is 7 days in the Mikdash. In the Gvulin, it's 1 day. So you might say, listen, taking a Lulav, it's the Oraita. I'm going to say a Halal. Everyone's going to say Halal first day. But the other days, and the Lulav has a certain stature we saw a few times. You might want to chalk it up to nothing more than Hashkafa. I think the halachic implications are where the Lulav is involved with Ritzui, like a korban. It's being elevated, doing different things with it, right? And you're doing it, it's not a tnufa, but it is a waving, and not a nua. It's things that are parallel, right? So you could have made a case. Yeah, so that's only 1 day. So Halal 1 day. Yeah. The chiluk, the shemei echag chalukim b'korbanot, the change in the number of korbanot, that's what's determinative. Rashi is disabusing us of a havamina we would have otherwise had, or a question rather that we would have had about this mission. Like, what are you telling me about halal? What would my havamina have been had the mission not told me? And the answer is, you might not have focused on korbanot. You might have focused on something else. The mitzvah yom, right? Pesach, many of us are aware of the other reason, right? That people like to say, Maisa Yadeh Tovim B'Yam, you know? So we like to diminish after the first day. That's not on as firm ground as the korban reason from a halachic vantage point. From an emotional perspective, it's very nice, etc. But I don't want to go down that road. Opinions about it. But there's something over here about why the Mishnah had to say Davka Hahalel is all 8 days. What's Vahasemcha? Rashi, Lechol Basar Shlamim. To eat the korbanot of Shlamim. To Kalam B'Psachim, Bisman Shemit Mikdash Kayam, Ein Simcha El B'Basar. Shenemar, V'Zavachta Shlamim V'Chalta Sham. All right. So as the Torah says, and you will be Zover Shlamim, and you will eat there. V'Samachta, you'll celebrate, right? V'Afagav, the Haikra Lav B'Regalim Ktiv. The Haikra Bahar Grizim Bahar Eval Ktiv. Miu B'Regalim Simcha Ktiva V'Samachta B'Chagacha. So it's this is the Rashi here fills it out based on Psachim. The mitzvah of Simcha here is not Simcha, just be joyous, but specifically eat korbanot shlamim the whole time. Now, in the days of the Beit HaMikdash, there's the korban. We learned it again. Those are doing daf, or if you did the daf of Shavuot with me, we did chagiga. You have a korban olat re'iyah that you're not eating any of. Then you have a korban shlamim that is the korban chagiga, and then you have shalmei simcha, other shlamim. All the meat you're going to eat, the flesh, you can't go to the butcher, the Romanian. You have to get it from the mizbech, ideally. That's what we're talking about. So you should be aware there's a mitzvah to eat that basar every day of the 8 days of Yom Tov. I note also that Rashi does point out from Psachim, when the Beit HaMikdash was standing, that we said the simcha was with the basar. It actually goes to say basar v'yayin in one of the places, right? So it's not always clear that today eating meat on Yom Tov is the simcha of Yom Tov anymore, because it's not actually basar shlamim. It's basar, it's chulin. Yeah, it's not from a shchitat a kodesh, but chol.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I thought it was Ein Simcha Elav Basar B'Yayin. I thought that was the whole concept.
I know. Yeah.
Does that mean we don't need jewelry and clothes for the women then?
No, that's the Rambam. That's a psak din. Don't almost call me over here. My point is just to say, those who want to argue that maybe you don't actually have to have red meat every day of Yom Tov, they would say, wait a second, the basar being referenced wasn't actually the basar of any basar. We translated into that, and many of us are very happy about that. yours truly included. But like Lamaisa, what if you really hate meat? What if you're vegetarian? Et cetera, et cetera. That's a halacha shir, not for tonight. Let's go back to what we're learning over here. Rashi here quotes from the Gemara Pesachim, who points out, that the source is actually from where? From like Parshat, Kitavo. I think Parshat Kitavo, right? It says it's Har Grizim Har Eval. I think that's where it is. Perek Zayin or so. But because of the fact that it mentions, even though it's mentioned there by Har Grizim Har Eval, and it's not about the Shalosh Regalim, it says V'samachta, because you'll be joyous with the korbanot that you're giving, and you're eating V'chal Tasham from the Zevach of the Shlamim, and the Regalim also Simcha. That's the Simcha in question. How it gets translated later, so that's a matter of halacha, as Eddie pointed out, the colored clothing and the whatever the things are for the kids, etc. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But back a little while ago, you said, well, sometimes Lulav is Doche Shabbos, sometimes it's not.
It sounds that way.
Yeah, I mean, this was before the Gezerah that people were worried about carrying. So if you're not worried about carrying, what's the potential conflict at all? Why are they conflicting with each other?
If people were not yet worried about carrying, or when they became worried about carrying?
No, I'm saying that this Mishnah is from the days before the Gezerah about carrying.
Clearly.
So if carrying is not a factor, why would you think that there's any conflict at all between Lulav and Shabbos?
Carrying is a factor. Why they had to bring it before Shabbos? The Gzera D'Rabba is going to go an extra step. We'll see it in a minute. The Gzera D'Rabba went a further step than what the Mishnah is talking about. The Mishnah is saying you can't carry, but better stay home and make your Lulav waving happen at home. Basically, sounds like say your hollow at home. Better that than you're going to come to the Harabite and have a fight, a squabble over whose Lulav is who. Whose Lulav is whose. Yeah. Follow? In other words, what you're already a step ahead of me. You read the Parshat Shavua before the Parshat class. So you know what's going to happen. But I'm just saying, when you take it in, it's like a freeze frame. That's why I'm spending all this time on a Mishnah and a Shir. It's like, it's not stam, just give us some information and we'll analyze it. Why is it like this? Why is it written in exactly word to word? Why is Rashi giving us these perushim? What would I have thought otherwise? What's Mahava Mina? And I'm showing you that it turns out, from the Mishnah's perspective, the problem about carrying was not the main issue. The problem was that people are going to fight, and we can't have that. Now, you'll ask me, why didn't they just get nice plastic tags with the names for every person? Like, why didn't they mark it off? I don't know. They didn't have those kinds of tools. It was too hard to do. I don't know. Maybe it was still 1 million people. And I guess it's, it's tens of thousands of people, and your name is, Reuven Ben Shimon. It's not going to go well. Probably 500 people like that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. They didn't have a sophisticated way of, ID numbers. They'll have a claim check. You come get your Lulav. They have it, be giving it out. They didn't do that. They told me to stay home. They didn't say, well, you can't carry it and we don't trust you at home. So if you didn't leave it here before Shabbos, don't do the mitzvah. That's not what the Mishnah says. Gzera D'Rabba is going to say that. But yeah, Judah, go ahead, please. I don't hear you. Unmute. Yeah, okay.
Inyan Tiltul b'Shabbat. What is the origin of Yom Kippurim? They used to tie the ma'achelet on the korban while high and let him carry the ma'achelet to Bet HaMikdash.
The ma'achelet itself?
Yeah,
I know what you're saying, but they tied the ma'achelet to the animal?
so they didn't have to carry it.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, אבל זה Shabbat Shabbaton.
Yeah. Questionable.
Unless this minhag
You can't carry on Shabbos.
developed.
You can't put something on your animal to carry it on Shabbos either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not sure.
So, art, question is a valid question.
I'm not sholel. Klal, of course, a very valid question. But my point is just, Art knows already. We all know what's coming. You know, eventually they ban taking it even in your house on Shabbos. But there's a lot of risk about people carrying things on Shabbos. Why this Davka? Okay, we'll come to it. Look with me, last narrow line of Rashi. I go into hyper gear over here because I know whoever's going to Mincha, and I think the show's going to need help from Minyan based on what I'm hearing about the storm. So, okay, Sukka, right? Sukka, Leishev Basukka. Seems rather obvious. I don't know what I thought otherwise. Not sure. Just telling you, Sukkah is all 8 days. Yeah, 7 days. I mean, and you know that Leishev Basukka. Yeah, I guess. Nusach Hamayim, B'tmida Hachag Shachrit V'lo Arvit. Kidamrina B'Seder Yoma, Perek Sheni. Just wants you to know, Nusach Hamayim only in the morning, not in the Korban Ben Arbaim. Hechalil, that's the Simchat Beit Shoeva. Hayusmeichim B'Chag, Lichvot She'ivat Nusach Hamayim. Umachal Mechalilim V'Kinorot, wind instruments, string instruments. They were happy about the drawing of the water. You cannot play the instrument on Yom Tov. Hilkach Pamim Shehu Chamisha Yamim B'Chag Kigon Shalochal Yom Tov Rishon B'Shabbat. The first day of Yom Tov was not Shabbos, so then Shabbos is going to be in the middle. So it's not Docha Yom Tov. Certainly not Docha Shabbos to play the instruments, right? The Kevad Lodachi Yom Tov. Right. By the way, when we get to the Simchat Beit Shoeva, someone will ask me, but I thought they played instruments on Yom Tov in the base of Mikdash. It's not a malacha. So how come here? We'll get to it. Right. The Kevin de Lodachi Yom Tov, V'Kolshkein Shabbat, Shebechol Shamoid, Pashul Chamisha. There's 5 left. 5 days left. Upa'amim. I see you there, Lau. Give me 1 second there. Art, I had to mute you because it was background noise. Upamim, let me just finish the Rashi over here. Where am I? Upamim, Shushisha, Kigon Shechal Yom Tov Rishon B'Shabbat. So Saturday night, and then every other night, the Pashalu, Shisha Shechol, Hamoed. The Bisman, Mikdash, ain't Osim Yom Tov Sheni. At the time of the Mikdash, no such thing as Yom Tov Sheni, obviously, especially not in the place of the Mikdash. I don't fully understand what those last words of Rashi mean. After the Beit HaMikdash, do they make a Yom Tov Sheni? They never made a Yom Tov Sheni Yerushalayim, unless it was Rosh Hashanah, but they weren't playing instruments then. So Sukkot was always only 1 day. I don't know. Of all places, the Mikdash never had a Yom Tov Sheni. They didn't even have a Yom Tov Sheni. Outside, they couldn't get the messengers there. Then they needed Yom Tov Sheni. I don't know. I didn't see anyone on it, but that doesn't mean my question doesn't stand. Just maybe no one else thought of it. I doubt it. I just haven't found the person who answers it. Okay, Larry, go ahead.
What's the reason instruments? Whoops.
I hear you. What's the reason instruments?
What's the reason instruments that were part of the service were not prohibited on Shabbat? I thought
We're going to get to it when we get to. So I just said I'm tabling that discussion. We'll get to that when we get to the world Simchat Beit Shoeva. I thought there were instruments in the Beit HaMikdash.
Right.
Remember the choir singing and playing instruments?
Yes.
So were there no instruments at all ever on Yom Tov? It was just voice a cappella?
Oh, wait.
Yeah, it won't be tonight, but I'm saying we're going to get there. We'll get there. We'll get there soon. And that's what we have to understand. Now, we're still with Rashi. Look how much Rashi was on one Mishna, yeah? Because he's giving you all the material. Judah, go ahead.
Is it possible the Kavanah Osim Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot?
Yeah, it's possible, but of all places, the place where you can't have a Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot is Yerushalayim. Nachon?
And you're there.
Ad Yom Hazeh, but even in the time of the Galut.
Yeah.
That's what I don't know why. You know, because the Bisman Mikdash means at the time when there was a Mikdash, they didn't make Yom Tov Sheni. Did they make a Yom Tov Sheni when there was no more Beit HaMikdash? Eretz Yisrael?
No Bisman.
And in Lo Zocher Davar, because I just don't remember a thing like that. I don't know. Again, maybe it's a simple answer. I don't know, but I don't understand it. Let's keep going in Rashi. Yeah, Lulav Shiva, the Yom Tov Rishon Dachi Shabbat. We saw that already. Shakol Yamim. I'm still in Rashi. Shechal Bahen Yom Tov Rishon. We didn't say Shabbat B'chol Shamoid Lo Dachi. Right. For the rest of Yom Tov starts any other day of the week. Shabbat not going to be Docha. V'avagav D'Kol Shiva Hu Min HaTorah Ba Mikdash Lo Dachi. Even though all 7 days in the Beit HaMikdash is really Min HaTorah, the truth is, if Yom Tov will start on another day of the week, it will not be Docha Shabbat. Very strange. Kida Amrin on Taima b'Gemara, as the Gemara will explain why that is. V'chein Arava b'Shvi uva Gemara, and then the issue of the Arava on the seventh day the fact that it is Doche Shabbat. Isn't that weird? I mean, wouldn't you have thought that in the Mikdash, the Lulav could be taken all 7 days, no matter what? The mitzvah is 7 days, Minat Torah. Somehow, if it's not the first day, it's not Doche Shabbat. Interesting. Okay. 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 We'll come to it later on. Okay. Now, where am I?
Mitzvot Lulav.
I'm trying to wait 1 second. Time of the Gemara. Okay, we'll come to it when we get to Mem Gimel Bet. Before Mishna Shvi, all right, it explains why is the seventh day different. It'll explain in the Gemara there why the seventh day is different with regard to the Arava in the Mikdash, right? Why it would fall out differently. Mitzvah Lulav b'yom tov harishin shechal yot b'Shabbat ketzad, right? The mitzvah of Lulav is if it's on the first day that happens on Shabbat. How does it play out? Hachigar sinan yom tov harishin shechal yot b'Shabbat kol am malichin lulavein laharabayim erev Shabbat. Right, everyone would bring their Lulav from erev Shabbat. Hachazanin shamashin, the shamash. Shahayu sham l'tzorchei tzibur. They were there for the sake of the community needs. Okay. Al gabe itztaba. What's a itztaba? Rachava shel harabayit haita mukefet itztabaot. The road. It means really the courtyard area, the open area of the harabayit was itself ringed by platforms. Remember the itztaba? It was on Daf Daled years ago. We saw itztaba, a platform you build in your Sukka. Remember, it's too tall, so you build a platform to shorten the height of it. So then why did they build the itztabot? Leishev sham, so people could rest. It was covered and as an awning in case of rain. Al gava itztaba garsin b'Mishna matnitin the al gabe afsafsalim, which is on top of the platforms. It means on top of these benches. They would leave them on the benches all the way around the whole Harabayit. This is Canaan. Shedoagin shlo yidchafum lemachar vitma'achu hikahel hakol lakachat ish lulavo. They were worried about the safety of the older people. They get pushed around, they get crushed and trampled when other people would be going around trying to get their lulavit. Yeah. Umalamdim beitin et kulam lomar im yavo lulavo lidei chavero harehu shalo b'matana kedei shalo yehei etzlo lo gaz v'lo shal. We understood that intuitively, I think, didn't we? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do 3.5 lines of Gemara and not do justice to them, but just so we could say we started the Gemara and so that we'll have our problems lined up, God willing, for next week. We're back in person next week, by the way, if all goes well. So here we are, Gemara. Now I'm in the Gemara, 3 lines up from the bottom. Amai, what's the problem? Tiltul ba'almahu, v'lidchei Shabbat, right? What's the issue? There's no isser. It's like you're carrying something around. And from the Torah, since the mitzvah, the Beit HaMikdash is all 7 days, why are we forbidding it on account of the issue of tiltul? V'lidchei, tiltul ba'almahu, v'lidchei Shabbat. Let Shabbat be pushed off. If the whole issue here is the fact that it's muktzah, so why is that going to be the issue? The Gemara clarifies, Amarabba, Gzeira, and somewhere here between the Mishnah and the Gemara, we've catapulted ourselves to our day, to us now, right? So Amarabba, Gzeira Shamit Lena Biyado, V'yerich Eitzel Baki Lilmod, lest you be taking it in your hand. You go to a person who is a baki, means an expert, to learn how to do the Na'nuim, presumably. Rashi, right, tells us it seems to be about that. The bottom of the page. V'aviranu arba amot birshut harabim. You'll end up carrying it 4 cubits in the public domain. Behind the time of the shofar, behind the time of the Megillah. It's the same reason with the shofar, and the same reason with the Megillah. That's all we're going to have time for tonight. So very mysterious. But you notice that as far as the Mishnah was concerned, they told people to stay home, but do it at home. The Gemara opens up with if the whole issue is that you're not allowed to carry it because it's muktzah, so then why shouldn't it muktzah is the rabbanan? Remember, it's a siag, a siag l'Torah. Muktzah is an example of a siag, but a mitzvah minat Torah to take the lulav and etrog, yeah. So why not permit it? We're worried that someone called gzera derabba, right? Which is a question: did he make the gzera, or is the gzera named for him because he's the one who just quoted it? It says here Amar Rabba gzera. It was a gzera, not that he made the gzera. Gzera shema yitlena biyado. Maybe he's going to take it in his hand and he'll take it to the expert and he'll carry it in the public domain. Lilmod, Rashi here says na'anu'o o birchato. Either the nanuim or the bracha, one or the other. Why? Because they're both part of the mitzvah, it turns out. Yeah, different parts of the mitzvah. Anyway, I want to let you go because if those who have to go to shul.
Yeah, the muktzah argument is circular to begin with. I mean, it's only muktzah because it has no use. If there was no gezerah, it wouldn't be muktzah to begin with. I mean,
V'haraya, by the way. Remember we learned the Mishnah Mem Bet Aben Aleph. The woman could take the lulav and the etrog from her husband and her son. She could put it back in the water on Shabbos. They finished the mitzvah already. It's muktzah. How could she be touching it? That was a whole thing we had, right? And so on and so forth. But you're quite right. But the Gemara here presupposes, the issue is muktzah. So the issue is muktzah. No, it's not muktzah. It's Shema Yavirenu, Dal Aleph B'Shut Rabim. We are still worried about the carry issue, and that is the carryover. That was a terrible pun, which was unintentional from the Mishnah, right? You have to bring your lulav etrog before, because oy vavoy if you're going to carry it in the public domain.
okay.
Now, the Gzera Derabba is also about carrying in the public domain, but it moved over a step. Instead of do it in your house, it's don't do it even in your house. Why? Because no longer even so many Jews were ignorant even of how to shake it, how to make a bracha. They never learned from the father, the grandfather. They never saw anybody clutch it in their hands and do it. They have to learn? Apparently. Eddie, you had your hand up, I feel like. Go ahead. Oh, you didn't. You're just waving goodbye. You're just going like this. You're waving. Okay, I don't know. I was just striking a pose. Let me wish everyone a get to Nacht. Yasher Koach. Thanks, Ara, for the Yasher Koach. Move to close. If you're able to go to shul to help with the minyan, that would be excellent. If
I'm on my way.
And we'll, God willing, we'll resume next week in person or on Zoom, whatever you're more comfortable with. Regards from everyone over here. We'll see you soon.
Have a safe trip back.
Weather
Okay.
permitting.